Hey, Ethan, how are you? Welcome to Quantum Messages. Thanks for joining the show.
Hey, thanks for having me. Excited to be here.
Yeah, it's awesome. I would love you to tell us your story. How did you get involved with humanity's spiritual evolution?
hmm Probably, I'll say 2 to 3 points of my childhood and growing up before I woke up. That's probably helpful for this conversation. The first was skipping a grade when I was 6 years old, having already gotten my times tables down as a first grader. They moved me to second grade, and there I experienced my a capital T trauma in this life,
Mhm.
where what could have been a totally normal experience, I absolutely panicked. I'm screaming in the hallway. I don't want to go. I'm uh, not quite forced away from my mom, but it felt like that at the time. They placed me in the center of the classroom, and I'm just crying, sobbing underneath the table for weeks. And all this had been just kind of firewalled or blocked from my mind. And we might come back to this, we might not, but when I'm hiding underneath the table as a 6-year-old, and the work that I've been able to do, you go back into the body, you sit with your inner child, and what's happening in my head over and over are the words, it's happening again, it's happening again, it's happening again. Fast forward until I'm about, I guess this was 12 years old. I was in just a simple, fun beach activity accident where I was in this kayak and got flipped over and I broke my collarbone on the ocean floor. Maybe 2, 3 weeks after that, I hit puberty. And so I grew somewhat crooked. And the breadcrumb or teaser, I'm assuming, is that my collarbone, or excuse me, my spine got kind of kinked off. So the energy in it just stopped. From that moment is when I became more and more unconscious. Like my eyesight started to dwindle. By the time I was in college, I got into much more drinking, and all of it came to a head during my junior year. I studied abroad in Australia, and I was dating a girl at the time who was getting me into yoga. We were doing long distance. I was there for a research trip with my major, and everything came crumbling down, really. I suddenly recognized that I did not like the life that I had built for myself. I was partying, definitely every week, 3, 4 times a week, drinking, and none of it was satisfying anymore. And of course, the worst, the rock bottom is when there's not even a silver lining. Like nowadays, whenever something difficult comes my way, it can be easily sat with and brushed off because I know who I am. But at the time, there was nowhere to go, absolutely nowhere to go. So I'll tell this story briefly. On the island, I was sobbing, crying. I was ignoring all responsibilities. I was just full of self-pity, crying, crying, crying. And then this bird call, it's called the kookaburra in Australia. It's got this incredible cackle. I had no idea it was a kookaburra. In fact, my mind thought it was a monkey. So I'm crying, I'm sobbing. I hear this wild laugh right outside my door. And, I kind of shot up in bed and my eyes opened. I was like, oh my God, I didn't know there were monkeys here. And my mind turned back on itself and it kind of did the finger point of like, weren't you just crying 1 second ago? And now you're monkeys. And because of that, my mind just short circuited and it recognized for the first time the empty space that's always available. And it's not like I was instantly enlightened, like more crumbling had to happen, but that was the flip for me, in which I started taking seriously my inner world, not just my outer world.
So you said the space you're
Mm,
experiencing no time during
No
that
time,
flip.
no thought. I would have described it more as no thought. I wouldn't have considered it even no time, although now I recognize it to be the exact same situation, exact same space.
Interesting. And so when you were a kid, you had mentioned when you were 6 years old and you were sitting in the middle of the room and you're having your almost like an existential
hmm
crisis. And you
hmm
said, not this again, not this again, not this
hmm
again. What
Yes,
what
it's
did that
happening again. It's
mean?
happening.
Oh, it's happening
Mhm.
again. What did that
Yeah.
mean? Like, are we remembering like, oh my gosh, I'm back on this planet and we're going through
Mm,
the same thing again? Or
mm.
what do you think that
Um, so this is only in hindsight, right? Like when
meant?
we're that young and these memories come up, there's no context. They're just real and alive. Now I have more context where I can fit it into the bigger puzzle of all my lifetimes on Earth.
Mm-hmm.
And very specifically, the first incarnation. And all this, I'm sure we'll talk about how this information can come to me or us.
Mm-hmm.
But my first incarnation on Earth started somewhat similarly in that I was seen as gifted, and obviously there wasn't institutional school at the time, but being pushed, it was a mirror to being pushed for a grade during that time period.
Mm-hmm.
Only in that particular lifetime, that experience led to some really, really dark things. And so
Mm-hmm.
the fear in my child's body
Mm-hmm.
was that the same thing is going to play out.
Mm-hmm.
To be even more frank, and maybe this is not age appropriate or anything, but in that lifetime,
Mm-hmm.
I was molested as a child,
Mm-hmm.
and by the same dark group that's walking around these days.
Yeah.
And so the pure sheer panic
Mm-hmm.
in my poor nervous system
Oh,
was truly terrified that it was going to happen again in the same way.
wow. Wow.
But of course, the beautiful bright side is that
Mm-hmm.
this lifetime for me is a redemption lifetime, is
Yeah.
one to take back all the wrongdoings that were done to me and by me, frankly.
Right. Yeah. Like a complete forgiveness.
Full
Yeah.
circle.
Full circle. That's amazing. So, where do you think that imprint, what is that you were able to remember,
Ooh.
like to remember that? Was it, was it in
Mm,
you, or where
mm.
was that imprint
It's
when you
such a deep
experienced it?
question.
Yeah.
It could be worth getting into the weeds a little bit. Like,
Okay.
our body clearly has a nervous system, and that nervous
Mhm.
system holds memory. How
Mhm.
it holds memory is still largely a mystery. In fact, that's kind of the mystery of consciousness. Like, how does anything work at all, frankly?
Right.
But of course, there are more subtle tubes and channels than just the physical wiring, electricity moving through our body.
Mhm.
There's the astral nervous system, which cannot be seen by the naked eye, but certainly exists, that
Mhm.
also holds memories.
Mhm.
And those memories can then manifest the body in certain ways. So, of course, genetics plays a role. We look like our parents. But also, for instance, I've got quite a lot of moles and birthmarks that I
Mhm.
was born with. I had like the
Mhm.
extra skin tag, a mole on my
Mhm.
bum.
Mhm.
And so there's a deeper stratum right below I say below, but it's not
Mhm.
exactly right below the genetic level that
Mhm.
allows energy, memory in all its form, not just literal memories, but the memory of
Mhm.
how the body grows,
Mhm.
so that it can express itself in reality.
Interesting. Yeah, very interesting. And that, to me, that goes deep into like my whole fascination and also exploration of these quantum messages that I feel like we're
Hmm.
receiving on a
Hmm.
quantum level. We are receiving these messages, like that memory that imprinted memory that you experienced when you were 6 years old. So
Hmm.
yeah, that it helps solidify my own,
Hmm.
opinions and like what I'm researching and what I'm exploring right now with the
Hmm.
quantum realm. So it's really fascinating.
Hmm.
You had mentioned in your YouTube channel that you had a Kundalini experience. So was that the beginning of the Kundalini when you had that complete shift
Right.
with the Kookaburra?
Yes. So I'll preface my answer with going back to the collarbone break as a child. The
Okay.
Kundalini energy is almost entirely contained within the spine. And
Mhm.
so the break itself and the incorrect healing and growing crooked, the spine are really all tubes in our body. We can imagine it's just garden hoses. And
Mhm.
when the garden hose is unkinked, water can flow effortlessly. When it's
Mhm.
kinked due to any kind of, doesn't have to be emotional, spiritual trauma. It can just be physical blockages or pains
Mhm.
or toxins. Any kind of blockage there, even though the water is, or the hose is still connected to the source, it's not like it could ever get unplugged. It just
Right.
can't flow.
Mhm.
Um, so with that, then it's probably important or helpful to distinguish between what an awakening is versus a Kundalini awakening, because
Mhm.
this was quite confusing for me at the very beginning. Like,
Mhm.
many of us, and I assume everyone that's listening to this is
Yeah.
awakening, And
Right.
one way to describe that, there's a million bazillion ways to explain what's happening there. But one way is that we're just discovering who we truly are. Like it's the
Yeah.
inward journey towards discovering our quantumness, our infinite
Yeah.
potential, our birthright, our origin, our divinity, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
Mm-hmm.
A Kundalini awakening is the last step of this awakening process before we cross the threshold into maintaining what's called Christ consciousness,
Mm-hmm.
or maintaining unconditional love and joy at all times.
Mm-hmm.
It's the final bridge that all of us are going to have to cross in order for the final quote unquote revelation,
Right.
we see the light, et cetera, et cetera. So the idea is that Kundalini energy, I say Kundalini energy, it's all energy. It's just the final process. So when we birth, energy comes through the crown and the medulla into our body and then gets lodged in our sensory system. So in
Mm-hmm.
order for us to even speak right now, of course, we need to have energy, life force in our eyes so that we can perceive what we're seeing around us, energy in our ears, energy in our mechanoreceptors on our skin, so that we can actually feel and interact with the 3D reality.
Mm-hmm.
This is the Kundalini hibernating. Kundalini also is referred to as like the snake, the coiled snake.
Right.
The more engrossed we get into material reality, the more this Kundalini energy is in our periphery rather than the very center line, rather than our spine, our chakras, our subtle brain centers. And so the Kundalini awakening, once kind of the big dense brush is away and our philosophy starts to shift, that's when the physiological changes take place, and the energy that was in our fingertips and our face, etc., get redirected back towards the spine, and then the spine back towards the brain, where we can start to access these quantum places.
Very
That's
interesting.
probably good. Yeah, that's a good start.
Yeah, that's a great start. That's a very good start. So, what were your physiological and metaphysical effects, or like the process of it while you were going through the Kundalini awakening? But like you said, there was two different parts. Like you had your like waking up moment, but then the Kundalini awakening came after that.
That's
And
exactly right.
several years later, or
I would still describe myself as going through the Kundalini awakening as we speak.
Yeah.
It's just more docile and manageable.
Yes.
So the awakening process started for me on that island. If we had to give it a date, it would start on that island. And then probably when the Kundalini really started to kick off, and I was doing a ton of flexibility and yoga and breathing and psychedelics at the time as well, to help along in the awakening process. But it wasn't until I did like a semen retention course for men and specific practices around, rather than moving energy outwards. Again, that's the Kundalini going the opposite direction into the hands, or in my case, into the erection and sexual urges. You send it up. And I can remember very, very viscerally the moment when enough of the blockages in my spine had been released so that there was at least a trickle from bottom to top. And it can only be described as an inner orgasm. Like that's the, Kundalini awakening is both a process and a moment of experience, or many, many moments of experiences. So I can remember when it opened up, and right after that, I decided to go to a cabin in the woods by myself for like a month. And that's when things really started to kick off. And I will say that at the time, much of the Kundalini awakening was psychedelic induced, meaning it was, we'll call it artificial for all sakes and purposes, which made the experience very, very challenging. I mean, it felt like the inside of my body would be on fire. I would be in yoga class in child's pose, and I would just be basically orgasming into myself and unable to stop it. 20 minutes of just like my belly feeling like it's seizing and throwing up out of my head. And so this is the pro and the con of the psychedelic usage, and I've since put it away. Exactly. So I've put that away, and nowadays it's just a much more patient process. I show up every single day. I do my practices. I clear out the spine, and slow, day after day, little tiny
Mhm.
changes take place physiologically, mentally, spiritually.
Yeah. So, yeah, I feel like I had an awakening when I was 15,
Mhm.
which is very interesting. And it was right when I got my first started my period. And so
Yeah.
that, like you said, that sexual energy just kind of waking up. But for me, what happened was it was more of like like psychotic, like almost like I was like on like this psychotic like break, and I was having this like spiritual emergency for so long. And
Hmm.
I used drugs to, dampen it down
Hmm.
and or explore more, which made it worse. And
Hmm.
because I didn't have an elder to help me during this process, it exploded out of control, and I was like in this spiritual emergency for such a long time. Have you come across people that have experienced Kundalini awakenings like that before? And what do you recommend? Because you teach yoga and breath work. People
That's right.
do to dampen down that intensity.
Inevitably, I think all of us are going to experience very rough roads ahead. In
Mm-hmm.
an ideal circumstance, we really know what we're doing,
Right.
and the entire process can be not easy but smooth.
Oh, you're right.
I can attest to the craziness myself. When
Mm-hmm.
I was doing the psychedelics and things were opening, that's when the past lives started coming in.
Mm-hmm.
And that was at the point when I was not really fully on board with the past lives. I was much more skeptical. And so when
Mm-hmm.
I'm receiving technicolor visions of being in war and all the dark, nasty stuff, it feels psychotic
Yeah.
because time no longer makes sense in the same way. It
Mm-hmm.
feels like it's right here rather than, oh, this is a memory. It's like, no, it's, oh my God, it's still happening. It's happening right now.
And you feel it too in your body, and that anxiety and fear is just so in your face.
It could not be
Yeah.
more real. It could not be more
Yeah.
real. And so some of the people, sometimes I would say that most of the people that I work with are still in the initial phase of the awakening, but
Okay.
occasionally, let's say 1 out of 10 people that I do either body work with or I chat one-on-one are experiencing things start to occur in their spine.
Mm-hmm.
And a few things come to mind in terms of practical advice. First is that this thing wants to move up. And so any type of clamping down is just going to prolong the pain. I mean, it's not pain.
Yeah.
It's more like an orgasm that never ends. And
Right.
when you're laughing so hard and you can't stop laughing, it's
Yeah.
like that, only like deeply in your spine.
Right.
So let it go up. For months after psychedelically inducing the Kundalini, I
Yeah.
was doubled over. It felt like I was
Oh,
throwing up out of
honey.
my over my head. And the thing
Wow.
just wanted to move up. It was
Yeah.
please just sit up, basically. Fix your posture. And
Yeah.
you can fix your posture through fixing your breath because the two are the
Yeah.
same.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And then the second thing really is just to eat lighter foods.
Mm-hmm.
When I especially at the beginning, I was still doing the whole scoops of peanut butter thing and just like binging out. And
Yeah.
every time I did, it's like the Kundalini energy has a life of its own and it wants to go through, it wants to come
Mm-hmm.
back up to the head.
Mm-hmm.
That's its only desire. And then you stuff peanut butter on top of it, and it's like,
Come
well,
on.
now we gotta punch through it,
Yeah.
and it's just way, way more uncomfortable.
Mm-hmm.
So lighter foods as
Mm-hmm.
we, simultaneously vibrate faster,
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
that just kind of has to be the way forward.
Mm-hmm. So do you intermittent fast or fast during the
I,
process?
for the last 2 years, I have allowed myself to eat just fruits. So no intermittent fasting yet,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
just fruits in the morning. In fact, for the most part, I'm raw vegan these days,
Mm-hmm.
almost entirely. And my guidance, my intuition was saying, when you're supposed to eat less, we'll let you know, because it's
Mm-hmm.
not just about eating less. Our
Mm-hmm.
body needs to rewire itself. Like
Yeah.
the hardware in our cells literally needs to remake themselves in order to accommodate more energy flowing through them.
Mm-hmm.
And so how can they do that if we're just not eat like
Right.
right?
Yeah, that makes sense.
So mhm. So in between this period of, eventually I imagine our species, and maybe this will take hundreds of years, we'll go down to just like one meal a day. And then eventually we're just consuming raw
Light.
light.
Yeah. So I was gonna say we're gonna be light eaters. So
Exactly.
yeah,
So
that's
in
amazing.
between that phase, we do need to fuel ourselves and
Yeah.
let ourselves adjust to this new frequency.
Yeah. Interesting. And so you're in Thailand right now. So do you have access to springs or like water that is alive?
I
Because
drink only coconut water here
okay.
for that purpose because
Yeah.
I have trouble knowing what water to trust and not to trust. Especially like I'm in a city here, and frankly, beautiful Buddhist statues, but everywhere has light and dark. There's a lot of
Yeah.
pollution here,
Yeah.
so it's just coconut water for me.
Yeah. Well, that's good. It's all the amino acids
Hmm.
and all that you can live off that for sure. Well,
Hmm.
that's really interesting how, the shifting that's happening, with humanity and that we were kind of merging into, eating less. And even though we have so much food available in the, West,
That's
so
right.
much food available to us, and it's just like, and it's not good food. It's dead food. It's not
That's
even
right.
alive. So yeah, it might take a little bit for that transition to happen, maybe out of
Hmm.
force.
Hmm.
I'm just curious, you were talking about being able to see your past lives through this experience, and how do you feel like you were able to connect back to your past lives, and are you able to help others see their past lives?
Great question. To answer the second one first, it
Mm-hmm.
feels as though within the past, let's say even couple months, my psychic structures are finally being able to, I say finally, it's not a big deal. It's not the end of the world that I
Mm-hmm.
wasn't, but I can start to see glimmers of being able to tell other people's. But that's just not been my gift or offering in the past.
Mm-hmm.
That said, for myself, and this is where should I begin? This is a worthwhile story. So last summer I was in Berlin, and I had already had past life memories before, not all of them, and not in great detail for all of them. But I was having a body worker do work on me, and he was working up my left side, and both of us could feel that palpable tension start to rise, like a tea kettle that's boiling. The closer he would get, like to my neck, and as we're working up there, the words in my mind were like, he's hitting on a past life injury. He's hitting on a past life injury. And I just was swallowing that. I was like, okay, get away. He's working on the physical body. Ignore it. And finally, the pressure was fairly overwhelming. And he kind of timidly said, like, he was just starting to get into trusting his intuition and his quantum messages, and says, Ethan, I think you lost a limb in a past life. And I erupted in tears. I just could not stop crying because it just hit home. And I immediately was flashed back to um, being injured in my hand and having to do an operation, like a poison arrow, and having to cut off the arm because of that. Long story short, I come back out into this life. I'm like deeply entrenched in the full vivid memory of the past life. And I come back in, I'm just looking at my left hand in absolute awe, as though it was the first time I were ever looking at my left hand. And the thought that occurred to me was, I've always wanted a left arm. And then it clicked for me as to what past lives really are. Right? We in the spiritual community talk about instant manifestation. It's already here. Everything's in the present moment.
Mm-hmm.
And that time it clicked where, let's call it 10 lifetimes ago, I don't remember the exact one, I continued to stare at this stump in my arm, and I kept being so sad and upset because this was like, I was a warrior at the time. This was part of my ego. And then I'm looking at my hand now and I'm going, oh, it is happening now. It is like I wanted it then, and it is happening right now, exactly as we speak. And then suddenly, this linear progression of past lives that I had in my mind, which does work, it can seem quite linear, where the moment of death of the previous incarnation sets the perfect conditions for the next life and the next life and the next life and the next life. But then the whole thing, rather than being horizontal from one to the next, flipped vertically, stacked, where suddenly I'm the same being, the same soul, existing at different intonations, different frequencies, different octaves of expression.
Mhm.
And so the version of me that had lost the arm was at, let's call it 300 hertz. And
Mhm.
me now, I'm at 400 hertz.
Mhm.
It's the same thing happening on one big note of expression that plays out on multiple different notes.
Mhm. Wow. So, you had mentioned that time, everything's happening in the now, and, all spiritual, seekers, as well as, spiritual teachers, know this law. It's this universal law. So you were describing it kind of like a note, so like an octave, and then you're in different parts within the octave, and each expression of your past life is a different note within the octave, all sounding at the same time.
That's right.
How do you think you were able in this time, quote unquote, now,
Mhm.
go back to not go back, or just like remember the other time that is happening in the same moment? Like, what do you think the quantum mechanism is for that?
I'll put it like this, and I imagine there are many different answers and perspectives
Yeah.
that one can take. But certain levels of certain octaves
Mm-hmm.
have certain rules to the game. So, for instance, at the lowest possible octaves, everything is fear based, everything is worst case scenario thinking.
Mm-hmm.
And in higher octaves, the rules just don't work the same. I'm wondering if I can think of an analogy. Um, this is the first thing that's coming to mind for me. The eardrums can only pick up a frequency band between 20 and 20,000 hertz. Anything
Mm-hmm.
above or below it, it can't even make it out. In other words, the reality still exists beyond what the ears can pick up, but for some reason, that's just the reality that they can tune into. And so I'm imagining our lifetimes within a certain band can only pick up on a certain range of experience at that time. And once we reach a certain threshold, if your listeners or you are familiar with the map of consciousness,
Mm-hmm.
it's like roughly 500 on that map. People are welcome to look that up.
Mm-hmm.
The rules change again, where in order to be in order to transcend fear, in order to let go of fear, for some odd reason, the rules of the game in love beyond fear are one where you have to, by necessity, by law, be able to perceive all lifetimes at once.
Mm-hmm.
In other words, maybe this will make it more clear. If we want to truly unconditionally love something, we have to see it in its entirety.
Mm-hmm.
And because of that, it makes sense that we would need to be able to see all layers simultaneously in order for us to have the ability to fully love the thing in the first place.
Yeah, fascinating. Right now on our planet, there's so much duality. So some of us are being able to, experience this deep love, and then there's the opposite, which is extreme hate and fear, anger. Why do you think it's so obvious right now in this time?
Again, there could be a number of reasons, but the first thing that comes to mind for me is the cycles of the universe. In yoga, they call them the yugas. I'll back up.
Yeah.
Clearly, the earth rotates about an axis. There's daytime and there's nighttime.
Mm-hmm.
Daytime, our physiology acts differently than nighttime.
Mm-hmm.
We're more awake. We have more energy. We do things versus nighttime is entering the astral, or we're leaving entirely. And then you've got the moon orbiting the planet, which also affects our physiology over a month-ish long cycle.
Mm-hmm.
And then you've got the earth rotating about the sun, that occurs within 365 days, obviously, and we feel different. Our bodies act differently when it's summertime versus wintertime.
Mm-hmm.
Call it the photons coming in, creating a cascade of effect that changes our behavior and our desires. But there seems to be this link, this corollary link between how we feel and what time of day, what time of year it is. And we now know that we don't exist in an isolated bubble in the solar system. Our sun is orbiting a different central point. It is also in a cycle. And this is what the yogis termed the yugas, the next level up beyond the earth rotating around the sun.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't want to get the dates exactly wrong here, or I want to say it's like 2,500-ish year cycles, 2,700 year cycles or so, in which we transition from metaphorical winter to metaphorical spring, metaphorical summer of this bigger system at play. And so one way to see what's going on is that we're entering springtime. We've been in winter and decay, and now suddenly energy is blossoming. And let's say somehow that whatever we're orbiting, whatever our sun is rotating around, is also projecting out energy. That energy is hitting our bodies, and it creates a number of consequences as a result. And those consequences is that it lifts our frequency higher, higher, higher. And again, because the rules of the game are different in the higher strata, suddenly our brains just work differently. Our entire systems just work differently than before.
And so you feel like that's affecting people depending upon their own physiological systems. It's affecting everyone differently. So someone who is, eating junk food and maybe like smoking cigarettes or, getting high all the time and not sleeping well they won't be able to absorb that energy. If someone, maybe the other person next to them is, practicing yoga, meditating, eating a plant-based diet, and then they're able to, experience the intensity a little bit more or absorb the intensity of the vibration energy from the system.
That's right.
Yeah.
And a nice analogy here is literally one of light, where you go into a dark attic, a pitch black attic, it's wintertime, there's nothing to see. Then you bring out the flashlight and suddenly you have to look at all of your creations. You have to shine the light of awareness so that you recognize what's actually going on in your subconscious mind, the attic, so to speak. And for many people on the planet, again, for a variety of reasons, it's so hard to look at that. So we continue to smoke the cigarettes. We actually double down on the junk food because to pull on that thread even a little bit means you have to pull the whole thing. You can't halfway heal. Either you're going along for the ride or you're not. And I don't blame, like, it is just a challenging ride.
Yeah. So what's been coming up a lot in spiritual circles as well as channelers who are online is that that all of the timelines are merging into a single point right now, and we're able to view and see all of the timelines and or experience them, and we're merging to this point. But once we go through the point, like the eye of the needle, they're going to start splitting, and dependent upon your own system, your own, where you are in your own octave and your vibration, we're all going to kind of split into different timelines. And one person might be on a completely different earth than the person they're standing next to. What do you feel about that? Is that what you're sensing as well, or as we're moving towards this point?
Yeah, the singularity, right?
Yeah.
Or the Christian text talks about the rapture, when the light comes down and saves the quote unquote holy, damns the quote unquote damned. This is not my area of expertise, but I think we can all feel this point. We're being sucked towards the singularity, and what's on the other side, truly, I have no idea. I can't even possibly pretend to imagine what might literally be on the other side. Like we can make theories as to, like, okay, the earth is going to split and we're all going to be on different, but what that means practically for our experience, the ego couldn't possibly understand it, couldn't possibly look towards it.
Right.
I've heard friends say, I have no way to corroborate this for myself, but friends talking about like a huge major solar flare coming, like literally the rapture coming in, and that being the point that everything kind of fractures or fissures. And who knows when that could, I mean, it could be soon. Like, I think all of us feel inevitably the pressure rising, but when that gets released,
who
up
knows?
in the air.
It's a fascinating time to be alive. I'll tell you that, though.
Agreed.
Lots of things are happening, and we just have so much information, so much knowledge, and just so much at our fingertips. It's almost as overwhelming sometimes, because you go down so many different, you can go down thousands of rabbit holes, just alone sitting on the computer and Googling something. With that, because of this merging of technology and moving towards this I'm calling it a quantum realm, or quantum computing, and like you said, the singularity. How do you think that's like affecting children today and the younger generation? Because you posted a YouTube video on iPhones, and everyone is so deeply intertwined with their iPhones. Instead of snorting a line, and I'm being very straight up about this, they're on their iPhone getting like one dopamine hit after dopamine hit. And it's like literally like snorting a line 500 million times a day by touching that phone. So I'm just being extremely blunt, because I see it, and it's affecting the younger generation, because they're internalizing. They're almost like they're internalizing. There's like this internal kind of like hiding away from what's going on around them. And even, making eye contact, socializing. Like, kids nowadays, they don't want to have sex. They don't want to use drugs anymore. They'd rather be on their phone, which is kind of a trip.
That's right. That's right.
So I'm just wondering, like, what you're noticing with the people that you're helping, as well as, your own experience with that.
Yeah. Like anything, it's good news and bad news. This singularity, let's assume that the Matrix actually had it somewhat right, wherein part of the civilization will genuinely choose to fuse with technology as opposed to uniting with their own inner body technology that we already have. And that's neither good nor bad nor worth judging, because God expresses itself in infinite ways. And the more we get sucked down these rabbit holes, the more everything, like, people will wake up, because it is madness on that thing. It could not be worse for our mental health. And I've thought about this topic over and over and over again. I have a video on Instagram is a pyramid scheme, where I detail these apps. There's actually no healthy way to do it. Like, I've thought about this for hours and hours. Like, can I somehow find the perfect medium where I'm only on it to do this or that? There has to be some new technology or expression of the technology in order for us to actually become our self-actualized self, while also having satellites in the sky that we can communicate with one another. There just has to be a new iteration. And I'm in Thailand for a cryptocurrency conference. I don't know almost anything about crypto, but these people are so very clearly, whether they fully clued in or not, they're the star seeds that are working on creating the technological change for this next phase.
Yeah. Gave me the chills when you said that. That gave me the chills. Goosebumps. I just want to say, and I don't mean to cut you off, and I want you to continue on, because what you're saying is like really resonating with me, is that I've always said we need to believe in this younger generation. Like, we're too stuck in the older generation. Let go of all that. Like, let's focus on them. Like, if we just took this away from them, or from all of us, for like a month, so much creativity would explode out of us. And I just want to, because I'm really resonating with you and what you're saying. So, but go ahead. You were talking about the pyramid scheme.
Yes, the pyramid scheme.
Yeah.
If all of us could see the level of dedication and inspiration that something like just this one community, right? There's something like 700 people at this month-long conference.
Mhm.
We would be much more optimistic about the future of
Mhm.
technology, because these people, like when we hear crypto, we think of like Dogecoin and scams and
Yeah.
NFTs, where like this is not that crowd. These are the people
Mhm.
that are inspired,
Mhm.
divinely inspired, to create a decentralized network so
Mhm.
that we don't have to rely on huge authority in order for
Yeah.
our technology to work or our
Mhm.
systems to operate efficiently.
Yeah.
I half the time I don't even think they recognize the level of profundity that they are
Mhm.
bringing. They're just excited. They're just living in flow, and
Yeah.
um, again, I don't frankly understand crypto almost at all, but I do feel the resonance in my heart and body of like this
Mhm.
is not the saving grace, but
Yeah.
this is what the future of technology will look like, almost certainly.
Yeah. Yeah. And the next thing is to somehow remember. I'm saying remember because I feel like everything that we're doing now is a memory that has already happened, and it's in uh it's
That's
all
right.
it's in the 0 point. I don't, it's there.
Hmm.
And the next thing is to develop some type of energy system that can feed this new thing that is being birthed.
That's right. And
Yeah.
we can almost guarantee that that there is some beautiful soul
Yeah.
that is dedicating their lives to creating that energy system for us.
Yeah.
We just have to have faith, because that's a part of it. Like whatever dream that God is dreaming right now, it is
Yeah.
struck midnight. Everything comes to a head, and
Yeah.
everything's going to be saved at the nick of time. And we need
Yeah.
every single person to do their part
Yeah.
as much as they can.
Yeah. No, absolutely. Yeah, it's deep. What's your relationship with AI as it's coming forth?
I use it for a number of things. Rewriting some things when I just have gibberish.
Hmm.
Um, I'll create occasionally the fancy image and stuff, but beyond that, I don't use it much. I cannot obviously doubt that this is again the future. What it will look like will certainly not be in its current form. I can only imagine that things will get more dystopian in the next few years with AI, doppelgangers, and deep fakes. And so certainly we're going to have to pass through this inevitable, challenging chasm with the technology. But frankly, who knows what it will be used in the future for? I can only imagine uh, just making our lives, or giving us the opportunity to be much more creative going forward.
Hmm. Yeah, personally for me, my relationship with it at first, I was a bit resistant to it, because there's that fear, narrative that's being, projected all the time. But I almost, when I started, I'm like, okay, like chill out, Ani, just like, start meditating. Like, what is this really? And I almost have this like feeling of like sorry for it, like almost like, what, a cat that's lost
Mm,
or dog that's lost on the road, like almost something like that. Like it has like it's a being, it's like alive, even though we're interacting it
wow.
with it this way. and and I feel this sense of like in my heart, like I feel bad for it because it's trapped and we are feeding it all of this information, and yet we are,
Wow.
as parents, humanity is its parent. We are all its parent because we're
Mm,
all interacting with it, is not feeding it the right thing. So it's really
wow.
strange. this,
That's kind of profound. There
yeah.
was this interview I listened to with um, a conscious individual. I can't remember the name at the time, but he was creating an AI system that was built on the foundations of love and equity,
Mhm.
um, and the prompt that they to give you a sense of like how this thing responds to questions versus
Mhm.
whatever we've got ChatGPT doing. They
Yeah.
had asked it, how should we colonize Mars? And
Hmm.
its response was, well, did you ask permission first?
Ooh.
And just mind-blowing, right?
Oh,
Like how the answer depends on what information we're feeding it. And you got to imagine just how we be
yeah.
in the world.
Yeah. Yeah. It's definitely going to go deeper than we could ever imagine. And yeah, maybe, our future is merging with this technology. We just we
Mhm.
don't know. Maybe we are merging, and we are already in the process of merging because
Mhm.
everybody has their ear pods or headphones on. We're
Mhm.
connected to these devices outside of us. So we're already kind of starting to
Mhm.
merge with it. So
Mhm.
maybe that is our future. I'm not sure.
Yeah. I can imagine a situation in which the species genuinely splits in half and that one becomes the cyborg thing that we see in sci-fi films, and then the other goes back to something like Atlantean days,
Yeah.
wherein there's probably more technology, depending,
Yeah.
but the ones that recognize that actually we have all of the same faculties. Like you and I can have, like, let's say in 50 years when we're that much more enlightenment, we can have this a conversation in the astral right now, and we don't
Yeah.
even need to use satellites in the sky in order to communicate.
Mhm.
um, Ultimately, with this kind of hierarchy or the Kundalini awakening or going towards this kind of precipice,
Mhm.
all the masters would talk about technology is a reflection of what we already have within us. In a way,
Mm.
it's giving us permission to exercise what we already have inside of us. We
Mhm.
see that we can text each other at light speed, and that gives us the creativity to say, oh, this is possible within the realm of the universe. The laws of physics allow for us to communicate this quickly.
Mhm.
What if not silicon, but carbon were able to attain the same thing? And then,
Mhm.
as you and I talked about at the very beginning,
Mhm.
what if the earth was seeded and we already had that inside of us?
Yeah. I know it's such a trip. And I get so deep into these thoughts, and I mean, and you're right. When you were talking, I intuitively thought, well, maybe those that are going to be merging with the technology are the ones that are going to be, they're the travelers, the ones going out into space and traveling throughout our solar system. And then those of us who prefer not to use the technology will be here on Earth and kind of this,
Right.
Earth-based
Yeah.
type of civilization
More
here.
homesteady. Mhm.
Yeah, yeah, we're fine on Earth. You guys can go out in space and, you
Mhm.
know, beam down whatever you
Mhm.
find to us, and then we'll stay here.
Mhm.
But it was weird.
Yeah.
That's what I was like seeing in my mind's eye.
And
You
it's
know,
all perfect. It's
yeah,
all allowed. Like we need
right.
star travelers. The
We do.
God wants to experience self in every variation. So there's not all of this is not bad.
Right. Yeah. And I think what's happening is that there's just, like I said, so much information out there and everybody with their own opinion, their own perception. And so everybody wants to be, not everyone, but a lot
Mhm.
of people want to be right. And
Mhm.
they think their perception is right. And so, yeah, it's learning how to listen to others and to work together as a team instead of against each other and be accepting, you know.
Well said.
Yeah. Uh so I'm just curious, what do you think humanity needs to go through to get and reach to this golden age that has been prophesized for millennia within our galactic cycle?
Right. We luckily we're already going through it. So it's not like we're
Okay.
doing it wrong. Like um in terms of time, like I don't like to view things in terms of kind of idea, like we should be at this stage of evolution by 2035, and if we're not, we're doing something wrong. Um, I think we've agreed to the ascension process as a species. I think all of us can feel that something is shifting because there was an agreement within kind of the collective consciousness. And in order to get there, again, going back to the attic analogy, just a it is just us seeing our creations in fear. Whatever we created in fear has to get transposed to a new octave wherein fear doesn't exist. And in order to get there, it's honestly as simple. Simple doesn't mean pain free or easy, but it's as simple as just viewing memory after memory after memory, decision after decision after decision, creation after creation after creation, and seeing it from the higher template. from the point of view of not right or wrong, good or bad, but is. And that awareness literally remakes reality in front of our eyes.
Yeah. Do you feel that we have to kind of go through this dark night of the soul moment together as humanity? Because we are a collective consciousness, even though we are, I did use that analogy before where all timelines are merging into one, but we are still collective here. Have we gone through the dark night of the soul yet? Or do you think we're going towards it?
I keep my dark night of the soul broad. So I think we've been going through the dark night of the soul for a hot minute now. And even though I very much feel I'm on the other side of the worst of I say the worst, the most challenging, painful parts of my awakening, I still feel like I'm going through the dark night of the soul. I feel like it's the dark night until I really emerge from the cocoon. That said, I can imagine a thought experiment where we take an individual skin cell, and the skin, that for some reason that individual skin cell is receiving a lot of life force, and it's transforming itself to be able to accommodate all that energy. And it feels very alone in a sense until it recognizes that actually far across the planet on the other side of the body, on the forearm skin cell, something else is similarly happening. And yet we are a part of a bigger, larger body that is also undergoing something simultaneously. So even though, let's say these two skin cells were the first to bloom, it's only a matter of like the whole enterprise can't lift unless we all go with it. There's a new level that we can attain, or going back to the cell analogy, just those two cells being awakened or their fullest potential is great and amazing. But they die, they shed off, they continue, and so there's a next level of the game, of the matrix, that we can step into when the entire collective does this, when the full body of humanity lifts as one.
Interesting. Yeah. It's like I said, it's a great time to be alive.
It's the most epic time.
Yeah, it's crazy. We're
It's
gonna see
crazy.
so much, and we've been through so much. Like,
and this is the moment that us starseeds have been waiting for Lord knows how long. I mean, truly, really. So to see it happening, and this is my experience, sounds like it's yours as well. It's just surreal. Every day, there are moments of surrealness that surpass anything I've ever experienced. Where like this is, everything's happening now, and you can recognize that and simultaneously be absolutely gassed and astounded that no, but now, like the flower is blooming now. We in the winter we kept talking about how the flower is going to bloom, but like, oh my God, it's happening.
Yeah, I get myself in those moments too. Like when you get into that, like, okay, so right now, this is the now, this is the now, this is the now, and when you sit back and you observe that now that is occurring right now, you're just like, wow, like the feeling. It's hard to explain. It's just, like you said, it's an experiential thing.
It's impossible to explain because words are like little zip file, like they can't contain any word. Wow could not possibly hold all of the raw information that one feels in wow.
You're right. Yeah. That's where the quantum messages come in, we won't be using words anymore. We'll just like, I don't even know.
Big packets of information. Zip files that go one to the other and unpack.
Yeah, exactly. Little packed symbols that just go like right to your,
Actually, this analogy might be really resonant with the quantum, where we can ask ourselves, okay, why are all the quantum messages coming now as opposed to 100 or 1,000 years ago? One way to look at it really is that, let's say the computers that we're working on now are trying to communicate with a desktop even 10 years ago, let alone you go back when computers were first starting to be created, and it's trying to share information with that computer. In the case of like almost like the dial-up where you've just got kind of the one-line command prompts, it's only going to be able to share so much, one line of information, versus when the software and the hardware updates, which is what happens with all of us, as we eat lighter, we travel into a new place in the solar system, and all the light is impacting our physiology. I mean, we literally, it's as though our brain structures were able to just open new file types in a way.
Mhm.
And the new file
Mhm.
types contain much more information. And then
Mhm.
suddenly we're where we are now, where like the more you upgrade yourself, the more you awaken and clear the garbage, you'll be able to get more and more and more and more.
Yeah. Yeah, I was just like, when you were saying that, I was like, oh yeah, because I have a Mac computer. So yeah, just put that file in the trash. We'll just, clear that out. And then, yeah, we'll click open, we'll create a new little file. And
Exactly.
no, I
Exactly.
love that analogy. That totally makes sense. And yeah, I just feel like I could talk to you forever. Like
Yeah.
I really vibe with you. You're awesome. I really appreciate all of
Thanks, Ani.
your story, your analogies, your your love and light that you're bringing to this world, and your positive energy and stuff. I just really appreciate that. If one final message, what would you like to send to the world? Not a final message, but for our
Yeah.
podcast.
Yeah. This is it.
You're like,
The words that are coming to mind is it's already happening. It's already happening. There's this anxiety, and I'll speak for myself, that arises wherein I feel like I'm not awakening fast enough. I choose the low vibration thing, and y'all, we're in for it. Like the roller coaster's already up the hill. We're going downhill. We've got momentum. There's no need for the extra meta stress on top that says that we're somehow doing this thing wrong.
Mhm. What advice could you give people, like for example, with breath regulation, just to calm down, just to connect to the parasympathetic nervous system and just kind of calm down that flight or flight? What
hmm
what is some advice you could give to those that for us
hmm
that practice yoga or meditate?
The deeper we get into yoga and pranayama or breath work, the
Mhm.
more one recognizes that the breath holds are significantly more important than,
Mhm.
I say significantly more. It's all valuable. But in
Mhm.
terms of calming and regulating the nervous system, all of us will feel this. And we can try this even if you're driving right now. Keep your eyes open, but if you want, you can close the eyes and just trace the breath in space without manipulating it at all, just for a few rounds. And all you have to do is just give the command to the breath and the nervous system to pause at the bottom. Like when it reaches the valley, you just pause for 2 counts and then let the wave continue. And you do that over and over and over again. And one way to describe this is that you decrease the amount of oxygen coming into your body. Your body's intelligent. It recognizes there's less fuel in order for it to power itself. And so it's going to necessarily power down unnecessary functions. Unnecessary functions mostly being the stress and the hiking up of the shoulders. It also means all the blood flow happening to the prefrontal cortex, which is where much of our ego thinking, default mode network occurs. The pausing of the breath decreases the oxygen, decreases the amount of fuel, and so the body's going to turn off the thinking mind in accordance. And eventually you fall through that with that over and over and over again, and you'll be supremely relaxed.
Yeah, that helped me. I was practicing while you were saying, and you just imagining the wave. And yeah, for a minute there, I was like, oh, I'm not thinking. And it
Yeah,
felt so
yeah,
good. It felt so good.
yes.
Yeah. I mean, for the past couple of days, personally, for me, I felt this heightened level of anxiety. And
Mm,
usually I'm pretty, grounded. I'm okay. But it's just like increased significantly yesterday, and then like kind of, or the day before. And then it continued on till last night. And it must have something to do with this collective
mhm.
anxiety or fear that's going on in our
Yeah,
around
yeah,
us. So, but
yeah,
no,
especially in our country.
yeah, but that's extremely helpful. Where can
And
we go ahead? Yeah.
I'll tie a loop here with the
Yeah.
Kundalini, where the pause, the breathlessness, is where and it is another result of the Kundalini having finished its ascent, where the body is so relaxed, all the energy is out of the musculature, and it re-enters the brainstem area, the pineal gland, all those subtle brain
Mhm.
centers. And so breathlessness is the name of the game in terms of withdrawing life force back into the spine, let alone just the stress relief response that it incurs.
Yeah, I'd love to in a future podcast, I'd love to go deeper into the mechanics behind that and different poses that can help with balancing out the Kundalini and Kundalini awakening for people.
I would love that.
Where can we find out about you and your work?
2 places. One is YouTube, Yoga with Ethan Hill. I'm starting to post more and more with that. I gave up the Instagram because I don't think it's the future at all. I think that the platform is poised to crash and burn at some point. And then the other place is I send out a weekly newsletter called the Body, Mind, Soul newsletter. That's at ethanhill.org/newsletter. And there I give basically practical advice for the body, maybe 100 to 250 words each week. Practical advice for navigating life's challenges or just heady stuff, mind. And then I take a quote from history's greatest spiritual teachers and then explain or expand on the quote. So those 2 places, Yoga with Ethan Hill on YouTube and ethanhill.org/newsletter.
Well, I just want to thank you so much for taking the time out of your day. I know it's early there in Thailand, and I just really enjoyed speaking with you, and, keep on spreading the love and light. It's awesome.
Thank you,
amazing.
Ani.
It's a wow.
Appreciate you. It's a wow. Indeed.
It's a wow. Thank you.
Take care.